Jimin spirals into fury and chaos when he uncovers Jungkook's shocking secret. A picture of his late mother kept close to his heart. The thunderous crash of glass echoed through the studio, sending shards skittering across the floor like dangerous confetti. Jimin stood at the center of the wreckage, his breath ragged, eyes wild with fury. The door to the room slammed open, and Jungkook stood frozen in the doorway, a look of disbelief painted across his face. "Jimin?" Jungkook whispered, stepping forward, his voice soft and trembling. What are you doing?" Jimin's chest heaved as his eyes locked onto Jungkook, his voice barely a growl. "You think this is okay? You think this is something you can keep hidden from me?" He gestured violently towards the remnants of the shattered glass, his fingers trembling with barely contained rage. "That pendant. Why does it have her picture, Jungkook?" "My mother's picture." Jungkook's face drained of color. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. The silence between them stretched out like a taut wire, and for a moment, the only sound was the pounding of Jimin's heartbeat in his ears. Jimin's eyes flared, the weight of years of unresolved tension, jealousy, and betrayal crashing down on him. He had always known Jungkook was special to him, but this felt like something more. The pendant had been an intimate thing, something Jungkook never took off, something that always seemed to be a symbol of their bond. But now, seeing his mother's face within it, his mother, who had died when Jimin was just a boy, everything inside him snapped. "Tell me," Jimin shouted, stepping forward, grabbing Jungkook by the collar. "Why the hell do you have it? Why keep her close to you?" Jungkook's eyes flickered with something darker, something Jimin hadn't expected. He could see the conflict in his eyes, the guilt written plainly across his face. Slowly, Jungkook reached up, his fingers trembling, and touched the pendant that hung just under his shirt collar. His voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "I never meant to hide it, Jimin. It's just, don't give me that." Jimin interrupted, shaking him with enough force that Jungkook stumbled back. His voice cracked with a mixture of sorrow and anger. "You kept her picture? You kept her memory close to you? While I've been out here, trying to figure out what the hell happened to her, trying to understand why she's gone. And you've been keeping her like some kind of secret?" Jungkook winced at the sharpness in Jimin's words, but it was clear that there was more to the story. Jimin's anger was palpable, yet it was tainted with something deeper. His hands clenched into fists, the sting of betrayal seeping into every muscle. It wasn't just about the pendant. It was about the years of distance, the unspoken tension between them, the silent acknowledgments that never made it to the surface. "I didn't mean for it to be a secret," Jungkook finally managed, his voice breaking through the tension. "She was my mother too, Jimin. He took a deep breath, gathering strength as if the weight of the truth threatened to crush him. "I wasn't trying to take her away from you. I just never knew how to tell you." Jimin stepped back, his body shaking, his hands still clenched. He wanted to scream, to shout, to make Jungkook feel the weight of every wound he had carried for years. But instead, his breath faltered, and the anger began to dissipate, leaving only a dull ache in his chest. "You could have told me. You should have told me," Jimin said softly, his voice trembling now with something deeper than just anger. "We could have shared it. We could have." "I didn't know how to share her with you," Jungkook whispered, his words laden with years of guilt. "You were always so distant, Jimin. I thought, if I kept this part of her close, maybe I could hold on to it longer." The room was silent again, but now it was filled with something else. An understanding, an acknowledgement of how little they had really known about each other's grief, about each other's pain. Jimin felt the rage begin to burn down, replaced with a quiet sorrow, a sorrow that seemed to echo through the empty studio. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Jungkook said finally, his voice barely audible. I didn't know how to share it. I didn't know how to share her." Jimin's breath hitched, and for a moment, the weight of everything, the pain, the loss, the unresolved emotions, came crashing down on him. He thought of his mother, of the woman who had left him with more questions than answers. And now, Standing before him was Jungkook, his longtime friend, his brother-in-arms, who had kept this secret from him for reasons he still didn't fully understand. Slowly, Jimin lowered his gaze to the ground, the storm inside him beginning to calm, replaced by something quieter, more painful. He had wanted answers, wanted the truth so badly that it had consumed him. But now that he had it, he wasn't sure it had been worth the destruction. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this," Jimin said softly, his voice trembling. "But I'll try. I'll try to understand, Jungkook. Just don't ever keep something like this from me again." Jungkook nodded slowly, his expression pained but understanding. He didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them spoke volumes, heavy with everything they had just shared. But even as the room fell into an uneasy calm, Jimin couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far bigger, something darker. The truth had been uncovered, but with it came more questions, more mysteries to unravel. And Jimin wasn't sure if he was ready for whatever would come next. Jimin stood in the studio, his mind swirling in a storm of disbelief and anger. Jungkook's words lingered in the air like a poison he couldn't escape. "I didn't know how to share her with you." He could still hear the pain in Jungkook's voice, but it didn't lessen the fury building inside him. The truth, Jungkook had been carrying the memory of his mother close to him, hiding it away, thinking it was something only he had the right to hold on to. Jimin turned his back on Jungkook, pacing the room in tight, frantic circles. His fingers clenched and unclenched, a rhythm to release the tension, but nothing was working. His chest tightened with every breath. How had he not known? They had been through everything together. So many years, so many moments, and not once had Jungkook told him about this. His mother's picture, kept in the pendant so close to his heart. How could that have been kept from him? The studio, once a sanctuary of creation, now felt like a cage. The air was thick with unsaid things, with secrets that had been festering for too long. Jimin's gaze fell to the shattered glass, the shards glittering on the floor like twisted memories. It was a sight he would never forget, the wreckage of everything he thought he knew. "Jimin?" Jungkook's voice cut through the silence, hesitant but firm. "Please, don't do this." Jimin whirled around, his eyes flashing with fury. "Don't do this? Don't do what? You've kept this from me for so long, Jungkook. Do you think I'm just supposed to forgive you?" His voice rose with each word, a storm in the making. "You could have told me, you should have told me." "I didn't think you were ready," Jungkook said, his words strained, his posture slumped. "I thought it would hurt you more. You were always so distant, Jimin, so focused on your own pain. I didn't want to make it worse." Jimin felt the sting of those words like a slap to the face. "You think I was distant?" He spat, his fists clenching at his sides. "You think I wasn't hurting? I loved her too, Jungkook. She was my mother, too. You think I didn't miss her? You think I didn't suffer?" Jungkook stepped closer, his face pained. "I know, Jimin. I know. But it's not the same. It wasn't the same for you and me. We were never really together in that grief. You shut everyone out. And you kept everything to yourself. Including her memory." Jimin snapped back, his chest heaving with rage. "You think I didn't see the way you looked at that pendant? The way you held it so carefully? Like it was something only you had the right to cherish. I've been right there with you, every step, but you never told me the truth. Why?" Jungkook opened his mouth to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. His fingers traced the chain around his neck, the pendant pressed against his chest like a hidden, painful secret. "Because," Jungkook began slowly, "I was scared, Jimin. I was scared that if you knew how much she meant to me, you'd leave me. I was scared that you'd hate me, that you'd think I was trying to take something from you, even though I never wanted to." Jimin's eyes softened just for a moment, the weight of Jungkook's vulnerability breaking through the fury. But the anger quickly returned, swirling around him like a storm he couldn't control. He took a step back, his hands trembling as he rubbed his forehead, as if trying to hold on to something that was slipping away from him. "You should have known I would never hate you," Jimin whispered, his voice quieter now, but with an edge of hurt that cut deep. You should have known I would have wanted to share it with you. I'm not some stranger to you, Jungkook. I'm your brother. We've always been there for each other. And you still chose to keep her from me. The silence between them felt like a chasm too wide to cross. Jungkook stared at Jimin, his eyes full of regret, of guilt. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jimin couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't stand there, in the midst of this unresolved pain. He turned away, fists clenched at his sides, and stormed towards the door. But before he could reach it, Jungkook's voice stopped him. Jimin, wait. Jimin froze, the plea in Jungkook's voice pulling at something deep inside him. He slowly turned around, his face hard, but there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. Please, Jungkook said again, his voice cracking. I need you to understand. I never wanted to hurt you. I was just trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. I thought if I kept her close to me, it would help. Jimin shook his head, his voice low, almost defeated. You were selfish, Jungkook. You were so focused on your own pain that you couldn't see mine. You couldn't see what I was going through. I lost my mother too. You weren't the only one suffering. I know, Jungkook whispered, stepping closer now, his eyes pleading for Jimin to see the truth. But you were so distant. I didn't know how to reach you. Every time I tried, you pulled away. You were always so angry, Jimin. So angry at everything. I didn't know how to help. Jimin's heart clenched. He had been angry. So angry for so long. Angry at the world. At his mother for leaving him. Angry at the people who tried to fill her space. But he had never been angry at Jungkook. Not really. He had just felt alone. And now, hearing Jungkook's words, he realized how much of that loneliness had been self-inflicted. He had pushed people away, pushed Jungkook away, not because of what Jungkook had done, but because of what he himself couldn't let go of. Maybe you didn't know how to help, Jimin said softly, his voice barely a whisper. But you weren't the only one who needed help. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, Jimin. I'm so sorry. I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to make it right. Jimin stood there for a long time, staring at Jungkook. The weight of everything between them felt almost unbearable. But there was something else now too. Something he hadn't expected. A small, fragile thread of understanding, stretching out from one of them to the other. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Jimin finally took a deep breath, the anger draining out of him as quickly as it had come. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, he said, his voice still rough. But I'll try. I'll try to understand. Jungkook nodded slowly, relief washing over him. But there was still a heaviness in his eyes. I'll be here, Jimin, whenever you're ready. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. The storm inside Jimin wasn't over, but for the first time in years it felt like there was a chance, just a chance that it could calm down. But as they both stood there, the studio feeling emptier than ever, Jimin couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. There was still so much left to uncover. So many more pieces to this puzzle. And he wasn't sure if he was ready to face what those pieces would reveal. The silence that followed their heated exchange hung in the air like a thick fog, neither of them daring to break it. The space between them felt like an insurmountable chasm. Years of unspoken words, of broken trust, and of shared grief, now crashing into a single moment. Jimin's chest still heaved with anger, but now there was something else. A quiet ache deep within him that he couldn't quite place. His body was on edge, every muscle taut, yet a part of him wanted to collapse from the weight of the emotional turmoil. How could this happen? How could they have reached this point? His entire life, he had believed that Jungkook was the one person who would never betray him. Someone who would always understand, always be there. But now everything had changed. Jungkook took a step forward, his hands trembling, his eyes pleading for Jimin's understanding. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to catch in his throat, as if even he wasn't sure how to unravel the mess they had created. Jimin didn't turn to look at him. He couldn't. He needed to think, to process, to make sense of everything. But as much as he tried, all Jimin could see was the image of the pendant. The small, delicate chain that Jungkook had worn around his neck every day. And within it, the picture of his mother, the woman who had raised him, the woman he had lost when he was just a child. Why had Jungkook kept it? Why had he never told him? Jimin? Jungkook's voice broke through the fog, this time filled with desperation. I never meant to hurt you. You've got to believe me. I didn't want it to be like this. You have to understand. Jimin's fists clenched again, his fingernails digging into his palms as the old, familiar anger bubbled up. Don't try to explain it, Jimin snapped, his voice trembling with emotion. You should have told me. Could have handled it. We could have talked about it. But no, you kept it hidden, and you lied. I didn't lie, Jungkook replied, his voice tight, but still trying to hold on to some semblance of control. I never lied to you. I just kept it to myself. I thought you would see it as a betrayal. Jimin whirled around to face him, his eyes blazing. A betrayal? You think I would have seen it that way? His voice cracked, his chest rising and falling with the intensity of his words. You don't know me at all, do you? You think I would have hated you for keeping a part of my mother close to you? You think I would have wanted to shut you out? It wasn't that simple, Jungkook. It was everything. All the years we spent apart, all the ways you pulled away from me, all the times I tried to reach you but you kept me at arm's length. And now, you want to stand here and act like nothing's changed. Jungkook's face twisted with regret, his hands moving helplessly by his sides. I was scared, Jimin. I was scared that if I told you, you'd leave me. That if you knew how much she meant to me, you'd think I was trying to take her from you. I didn't know how to share her with you without losing you. I didn't know how to share anything anymore. Jimin's breath quickened, and for a moment, it was as if the floor beneath him was giving way. He took a step back, his eyes searching Jungkook's face, looking for something that could explain it all. Some piece of truth that would make it right again. But there was nothing. There was only the raw, unfiltered pain that reflected back at him. So you just kept everything to yourself? Jimin's voice was barely a whisper now, as if the weight of his own thoughts had made it impossible to speak any louder. You think that's okay? You think that's normal? We were supposed to be family, Jungkook. We were supposed to face everything together. I know, Jungkook said, his voice cracking with emotion. But I was trying to protect you, Jimin. I was trying to protect us. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to be the one to take her away from you. Jimin laughed bitterly, a hollow sound that only deepened the ache in his chest. By keeping her picture in a pendant and never telling me? How is that protecting me? His laugh faltered as the reality of the situation began to sink in. You think this was about protecting me? You kept me in the dark, Jungkook. You kept us both in the dark. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears as he took another step forward, reaching out toward Jimin. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know what you would say, or how you would react. Jimin stepped back, putting distance between them. The last thing he wanted was to hear Jungkook's apologies. They meant nothing now. He wanted answers, clarity, something more than just words. His eyes, still full of anger, met Jungkook's, but they also held a deep sorrow. A sorrow that weighed heavier than anything he could express. Jungkook, Jimin said, his voice breaking slightly as he spoke his name. You don't get it, do you? It wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about the picture or the pendant. It's about us. It's about everything we've been through, all the time we wasted, all the things we never said. There was a long pause before Jungkook spoke again, his voice full of vulnerability. I never wanted to waste time, Jimin. I never wanted to hurt you. But I guess I thought if I held on to something of hers, something that was mine too, it would make me feel close to her again. And I thought if I kept it from you, it would keep things from falling apart. But now, I see I was wrong. Jimin closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady himself. His mind was racing, his emotions a tangled mess of confusion, anger, and sadness. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Jungkook, he said quietly, his voice trembling with the weight of those words. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. You kept everything from me. The one person who was supposed to understand me the most, the one person who was supposed to be my family. I am your family, Jimin? Jungkook said urgently, stepping closer again, his voice desperate. I'm here. I've always been here. And I'll always be here no matter what. You don't have to forgive me right away. I don't expect that. But I need you to know. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Jimin turned away, his heart heavy, his mind spinning. The words hung in the air between them, but they didn't feel like enough. They didn't feel like they could undo the damage. He took a few steps toward the door again, his eyes blurry with unshed tears. I don't know what to do with this, he muttered, more to himself than to Jungkook. I don't know what to do with all this pain. I know, Jungkook said quietly, his voice barely audible. I know. Jimin opened the door, the cold air from outside rushing in, but he didn't leave. He didn't know what to say next. The world felt too big, too heavy, too uncertain. All he knew was that this wasn't over. Not yet. And he wasn't sure if he was ready to face what would come next. But one thing was clear. Their bond, whatever it was, had been broken, and he didn't know if it could ever be fixed. The days following their confrontation in the studio were a blur for Jimin. He had retreated into a silence that was louder than any words. His mind refused to let go of the image of the pendant, the way it had hung there, so close to Jungkook's heart, the photo of his mother nestled inside. Every time he closed his eyes, it was there, taunting him, reminding him of the years lost to silence and secrets. Jimin hadn't meant to distance himself. He had hoped that the conversation would have healed something between them, but it didn't. It only exposed deeper fractures. His anger hadn't gone away. It hadn't softened. If anything, it had only grown more intense, burning through his insides like an unquenchable fire. But the worst part was that Jimin knew, deep down, that Jungkook wasn't entirely to blame. The years of distance, of unspoken pain, of carrying the weight of grief alone, had created a divide between them. Jimin had never let anyone close enough to truly understand his pain, and Jungkook had been no exception. They had always been two people bound by their past, yet never fully in tune with one another's suffering. It was late when Jimin found himself back at the studio. The flickering lights, the smell of the unfinished recordings, the remnants of their shared creativity. All of it felt suffocating now. He stood in the middle of the room, staring at the wreckage from their last encounter. The glass, the broken frames, the discarded pieces of their friendship felt like a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. He didn't know what he was doing there, why he couldn't just leave and never return. The door creaked open, and there stood Jungkook. His face was pale, his eyes tired, but there was something else, something that seemed to pull at Jimin's heart, even in the midst of all his anger. Jimin, Jungkook said softly, stepping inside. His voice was hesitant, almost as if he feared Jimin's reaction. I thought I'd find you here. Jimin didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. His emotions were still a jumbled mess. Anger, hurt, confusion, and a strange sense of betrayal. How could they have gotten here? How had they let everything fall apart? I didn't come to fight, Jungkook continued, his voice low. I came because I need you to understand. I need you to know that I didn't want to keep anything from you. I never meant to hurt you, Jimin. Jimin's eyes were hard as he met Jungkook's gaze, but even in his fury, he could see the vulnerability in Jungkook's expression. It made something twist uncomfortably in his chest. How had they become so tangled in their own fears and pain that they couldn't talk to each other anymore? You've said that already, Jimin muttered, his voice thick with emotion. But I don't know if I believe you anymore. You've kept me in the dark for so long, Jungkook. You think I don't see it? The way you hid everything. The way you shut me out, even though you knew how I felt. I didn't shut you out, Jungkook said quickly, taking a step closer. I never meant to. I just didn't know how to make you see it, how to make you understand without making it worse. Jimin's eyes flickered with a mix of disbelief and frustration. Make it worse? You think keeping this from me was protecting me? How could it have been worse than this? He threw his hand out, indicating the mess around them, the shattered glass, the broken pieces of their friendship. This is what you've done. This is the result of your secrets. Of both our secrets. Jungkook looked down at the floor, as if the weight of Jimin's words were physically crushing him. His shoulders slumped, and he let out a long, weary sigh. I was selfish, Jimin. I know that, but I was just trying to hold on to something. Something that made me feel close to her. To both of us. He glanced up at Jimin, his eyes pleading for understanding. I never wanted to come between us. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you? Jimin asked, his voice trembling with frustration and grief. Why did you make me feel like I was the one pushing you away, when it was you who kept pulling away from me all these years? Jungkook's expression faltered, and for a moment, it was as if he didn't have an answer. But then, as if the words had been waiting to break free, he finally spoke. I was afraid, Jungkook whispered, his voice raw with emotion. I was afraid that if I told you everything, if I opened up completely, it would drive you away. I didn't know how to let you in without losing you, so I kept it to myself. Jimin's heart twisted in his chest. The vulnerability in Jungkook's voice, the pain in his eyes. It was too much. For a moment, Jimin was caught between his anger and something else. A deep, aching sympathy for the boy he had always considered his brother. I wasn't the only one suffering, you know? Jimin said quietly, his voice strained. I was lost too. You think I wasn't terrified of losing you? That I didn't feel like I was losing my mind every time I looked around and realized we were falling apart? But I never thought to keep things from you, Jungkook. I never thought to hide my pain from you. I know, Jungkook said, his voice thick with regret. I should have done better. I should have been there for you. I should have trusted you, even when I didn't know how to handle my own grief. But I was so wrapped up in my own fear, in my own pain, I couldn't see what was happening to us. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you by keeping this secret. The rawness in his voice hit Jimin harder than he expected. He felt the weight of the years they had spent apart, the walls they had built between each other out of fear and pride. It wasn't just Jungkook who had kept secrets. Jimin had kept his own fears, his own doubts, buried deep inside, and in doing so he had shut Jungkook out, too. Jimin took a step back, running a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of the swirl of emotions that overwhelmed him. I don't know what to do with all this, Jungkook, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix anything right now, Jungkook replied softly, his voice filled with a tenderness that made Jimin's heart ache. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. But I'm here, Jimin. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes. Jimin's heart felt like it was being torn in two. The words Jungkook spoke were exactly what he had wanted to hear. Yet they left him feeling emptier than ever. He wanted to believe him. He wanted to believe that everything could be fixed, that they could go back to being the way they were before all the pain and secrets had poisoned everything. But deep down, Jimin knew that wasn't possible. Not yet. I don't know if I can trust you again, Jimin murmured, his voice barely audible. But I'll try. I'll try to understand. I'll try to find a way. Jungkook nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and resignation. That's all I can ask for, Jimin. I'll wait. I'll wait for you. The tension in the room hung heavy, but there was something else now too. A tentative hope, fragile and uncertain, but real nonetheless. They both knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with difficult conversations, painful confessions, and healing that would take time. But for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a glimmer of something they hadn't shared in years, understanding. And that, at least, was a start. The air inside the studio was thick with unspoken words, and despite everything they had just shared, the silence between Jimin and Jungkook felt like a suffocating weight. Jimin couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, darker, was still lurking beneath the surface of their fragile reconciliation. They had shared their pain, their fears, their regrets, but that didn't mean the wound was healed. Not even close. The rawness of their emotions still clung to the space between them, and Jimin could feel the familiar itch in the back of his mind, urging him to push it all away, to retreat and lock it up in the dark corners of his heart as he had done for years. But the truth was he couldn't. Not anymore. Something had shifted, something had broken open inside him during that conversation, and no matter how much he tried to ignore it, it was there looming over him like a storm he couldn't outrun. He wanted to turn it off, to forget the painful truth that had been revealed between them. But he couldn't. Jungkook, for his part, seemed no better off. He sat on the edge of the recording desk, his hands folded tightly in his lap, staring down at the floor. There was a hollow look in his eyes, the kind of emptiness that comes from being pulled into something too deep, too raw, too real. And yet, even with everything that had happened, there was a glimmer of hope in his expression, a hope that Jimin wasn't sure he could share. "I've been thinking," Jimin said, his voice low and strained. He had paced around the studio for what felt like hours, but the words still felt foreign to him. "I've been thinking about what you said about how you were trying to protect me. About how you thought keeping her memory to yourself would somehow shield me from the pain." Jungkook nodded slowly, not looking up, but Jimin could see the way his shoulders tensed, as if he were bracing himself for what was to come. Jimin wasn't sure if he was ready to speak the words that were swirling in his mind, but they were there, too loud and too insistent to ignore. "You were wrong," Jimin continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't protect me, Jungkook. You made it worse. You made me feel like I was losing everything, not just her, but you. You shut me out, you pushed me away, and you expected me to understand. Well, I don't understand." Jungkook's head snapped up at the words, his eyes wide with surprise, but the hurt in his gaze was undeniable. "Jimin, No," Jimin interrupted, his voice sharper now, filled with an emotion that felt both foreign and familiar. "You don't get it. You think I'm angry about the pendant, about the picture of my mother that you kept to yourself. But I'm not just angry about that. I'm angry about everything else, the years of silence, the way you turned away from me when I needed you the most. You think you've been the only one hurting, but you haven't been. You've been so lost in your own grief, you never saw mine." The room seemed to shrink as the words hung heavy between them, each syllable a jagged shard of truth. Jungkook's face twisted with something between guilt and regret, and for a moment he seemed unable to find the words to respond. Jimin could see the weight of it all in his eyes, the years of their strained friendship, the years of both of them keeping their pain locked away, pretending it didn't matter, pretending they didn't matter. "I didn't know what to do, Jimin," Jungkook said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know how to help you. You were always so angry, so distant. I tried, I really did. But I couldn't get through to you. You were always pushing me away. And you were always keeping me in the dark," Jimin retorted bitterly, his words cutting deeper than he intended. "You never gave me a chance to let you in. Every time I tried to get close, you pulled away, hid behind that pendant, behind your secrets, behind the walls you built up around yourself." Jungkook's eyes closed as if the weight of Jimin's words had physically struck him. He exhaled slowly, a shaky breath that seemed to carry the weight of years of guilt. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," Jimin muttered, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know you didn't want to hurt me. But you did. And I don't know how to move past that." Jungkook stood up suddenly, his body trembling with emotion. He took a step toward Jimin, his eyes pleading. "Please, Jimin," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm not asking for everything to go back to the way it was. But I'm here, okay? I'm here now, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. We can figure this out together. We can start over." Jimin felt his breath catch in his throat, his chest tightening with the emotional weight of Jungkook's words. He had been so angry, so hurt, that he hadn't realized how badly he had needed to hear those words. But even now, even with Jungkook standing before him, offering him something he hadn't been able to give before, vulnerability, openness, Jimin wasn't sure if he could reach for it. He wasn't sure if he could trust it. "I don't know if I can start over, Jungkook," Jimin said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you've done." Jungkook's face crumpled at those words, his entire body sagging with the weight of Jimin's rejection. "Then, what do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "What happens to us?" Jimin swallowed hard, feeling his chest tighten, his heart pounding in his ears. He had never felt more lost, more unsure of what to do. His anger had been his armor for so long, but now that it was beginning to crack, he didn't know how to handle the raw vulnerability that had replaced it. He couldn't just pretend that everything was fine. He couldn't just move on. There was too much damage. Too much pain. "I don't know," Jimin admitted, his voice rough. "I don't know what happens now. but I can't just pretend like nothing's wrong. I need time, Jungkook. I need space to figure this out. I can't fix this overnight. I don't even know if I want to. Jungkook nodded, his face pale, his eyes filled with an emotion Jimin couldn't quite name. It wasn't relief and it wasn't anger. It was just resignation. A quiet acceptance of the reality that had settled between them. I understand, Jungkook said softly, taking a step back, giving Jimin the space he had asked for. I'll give you the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But as Jimin stood there, the weight of everything pressing down on him, he couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment when everything truly changed. If this was the moment that would either bring them closer or drive them farther apart. The tension in the room was thick and the silence that followed was deafening. Jimin's mind raced, his heart torn between the desire to let go of the anger and the overwhelming fear that, even if he did, it would never be enough. Their bond had been shattered, and though there was a glimmer of hope between them, it felt fragile, like it could break again at any moment. As Jimin glanced back at Jungkook, standing there with his head bowed in defeat, he knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. It wasn't just a matter of forgiveness. It was a matter of rebuilding what had been broken, piece by piece, and he wasn't sure if either of them was ready for that. The tension between Jimin and Jungkook had not dissipated since that night. It had lingered like a shadow between them, impossible to ignore. The studio, once a place of creativity and collaboration, now felt suffocating. Every corner seemed to echo their words from days ago, the weight of their confrontation hanging in the air like a storm that had yet to break. Jimin had tried to distract himself. He buried himself in work, in distractions, in anything that could keep him from facing the raw truth. But it wasn't working. Every song he wrote, every note he played, felt hollow. His fingers lingered on the guitar strings, but the music wouldn't come. The ideas were there, but they felt distant, like whispers of something that had slipped away just beyond reach. The anger still burned in him, but beneath it there was a gnawing sadness, something deeper, something unspoken. He could feel it gnawing at his insides. The realization that maybe, just maybe, their bond was too far gone to ever heal. That the years of hidden pain, the secrets kept from each other, might have irreparably changed everything. Jungkook had not left the studio. He was still here, somewhere in the building, likely trying to figure out how to fix what had been broken. But every time Jimin tried to speak to him, to confront him again, the words died in his throat. What could he say now? What could he ask? Could there ever be a way back to what they once had? It was late when Jimin finally found himself in the same room with Jungkook again. The silence between them had stretched on for days, thick and suffocating. It was almost as if nothing had been said, as if they were still standing at the same crossroads, unable to take the next step forward. Jungkook was sitting at the piano, his fingers grazing the keys, though he wasn't playing anything in particular. His head was down, his face hidden by his messy hair, but Jimin could tell by the way his shoulders were slumped that he wasn't okay. He wasn't pretending anymore. Jungkook, Jimin said, his voice hoarse but steady. It was the first time in days that he had said his name aloud. The simple act felt like a breaking point. We need to talk. Jungkook lifted his head slowly, his eyes meeting Jimin's. There was something unreadable in his expression, but Jimin could see the exhaustion in his face. The kind of tiredness that came from more than just lack of sleep, it was a fatigue that came from the weight of everything unsaid, everything unresolved. I know, Jungkook murmured, his voice quiet but carrying a weight of its own. I've been waiting for you to say that. The silence stretched out between them again, but this time it was different. It wasn't as suffocating. There was a sense of inevitability about it, as though they both knew they couldn't keep avoiding the hard conversations. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine, Jimin said, taking a step forward. I've tried. I've tried to move on, to bury it, but I can't. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jungkook. I don't know if I even want to. Jungkook's eyes dropped to the piano keys, his fingers absently tapping a rhythm that only he could hear. I understand, he said quietly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've always been sorry for the way I handled everything. I thought I was protecting you. But now I realize I've only been hurting you. Jimin's throat tightened at the rawness in Jungkook's voice. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected the apology to feel so real. He had wanted anger, more accusations, more conflict. He had wanted something to latch onto, something to make the pain bearable. But this was too much. Too raw. Jungkook, I don't know if I can even look at you the same way again, Jimin said, the words escaping before he could stop them. He wasn't sure if he meant them, but they felt true in the moment. You've kept things from me, Jungkook. Big things. Things I should have known. And I don't know how to move past that. Jungkook turned to face him, his eyes wide with a mixture of pain and regret. I know. I know I've betrayed you in ways that can't be fixed just by saying sorry. But I want to try. I want to make it right, Jimin. I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you. Jimin stood still, the words piercing his chest like a knife. They had always been close, always been brothers in a way that transcended friendship. And yet, somewhere along the way, things had gone wrong. Maybe it was the grief. Maybe it was the time. Or maybe it was just life. But somewhere, in all that time they had spent together, they had both stopped seeing each other for who they truly were. They had both gotten lost in their own worlds, their own pain, and now the distance between them seemed too wide to bridge. I don't know if I can be the person you want me to be, Jimin said, his voice breaking. I don't know if I can go back to being the way we were. It's too much. You've broken something inside me. Something I'm not sure can ever be fixed. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't speak. He simply stood up, his gaze never leaving Jimin's. There was a sadness in his eyes, one that matched Jimin's own. It was the sadness of realizing that maybe they were too far gone to ever return to the way things had been. I don't know what to do anymore, Jimin whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. I've spent so many years trying to understand this, trying to make sense of everything. And now I don't know what's left. Jungkook took a step closer, his hand reaching out, but he stopped himself before making contact. He was afraid of pushing Jimin too far, of breaking something else in the process. I'll wait, he said softly. I'll wait for you, Jimin. I know it's not going to be easy. I know it might take time. But I'll wait as long as it takes. I just need you to know that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Jimin's chest ached at the words. He could see the sincerity in Jungkook's eyes. He could feel the weight of the unspoken promises between them. But even then, even in the face of that vulnerability, there was something inside Jimin that recoiled. It was as if there was a part of him that had built a wall so high, so impenetrable, that he didn't know if he could ever break it down. I don't know how to do this anymore, Jungkook, Jimin said, his voice a whisper, barely audible. I don't know how to let you back in. The words hung between them, the silence settling in like a heavy fog. Jimin felt the weight of it all, the years, the pain, the secrets, and the uncertainty that lay ahead. He didn't know where this would go, whether it would lead them back to each other or push them further apart. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like they were on the verge of something. Something that might be painful, something that might be hard, but something that could also be the only way forward. I don't know either, Jungkook said softly, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. But I'm willing to try. And with that, Jimin stood there, caught between the past and the future, knowing that the road ahead would be long, uncertain, and filled with more pain. But somewhere deep inside, he knew he wasn't ready to give up just yet. Maybe they weren't too far gone. Maybe there was still hope. The weeks had passed, but the weight of what had happened between Jimin and Jungkook still lingered in the air, pressing down on them like a constant storm cloud. They hadn't spoken much since that night in the studio, and yet, in the silence, everything seemed louder. Every glance, every fleeting touch, every word they spoke felt heavy with unspoken truths. They both knew it had to be addressed. This couldn't go on forever, this simmering tension, this unresolved mess that neither one of them was willing to face head-on. Jimin had tried to keep himself busy, working late into the night, drowning himself in rehearsals, recording, anything to keep his mind off the gnawing emptiness that had taken root in him. But no matter how many hours he threw into his work, no matter how hard he pushed himself, the truth always seemed to catch up with him. He found himself in the studio late one evening, alone, staring at the mirror that hung across the room. He had been avoiding it, but now there was no turning back. He couldn't avoid the reflection staring back at him. He was tired. Tired of pretending like everything was fine. Tired of hiding behind his own anger, behind the walls he had built to protect himself. And most of all, he was tired of feeling this way. This ache in his chest. This sadness that had seeped into every part of his being. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how far they had drifted. He wasn't sure they could come back from this, from all the years of silence, all the things that had gone unsaid. But he had to try. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the studio door opening. He turned around and there stood Jungkook, his figure silhouetted by the dim light of the hallway. There was a hesitance in his posture, a weight to his every movement that mirrored Jimin's own. Jungkook's expression was unreadable, but Jimin could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He could see the same struggle that had been haunting him. Jimin, Jungkook said quietly, his voice soft but heavy. We need to talk. Jimin exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting to the floor. He had been waiting for this moment, dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. The silence between them had been unbearable, and yet now that they were standing here, facing each other, it felt like the ground had shifted beneath them. I don't know what to say, Jungkook, Jimin replied, his voice strained. I don't know what you want me to say. Jungkook took a step forward, his hands hanging loosely at his sides, his face etched with a mixture of regret and determination. I want you to understand, he said, his voice quiet but urgent. I want you to know why I did what I did. Why I kept everything from you. I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to keep running from this. Jimin's chest tightened and he felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to hear what Jungkook had to say. He wanted the explanation, the closure. But the other part of him, the part that had been hurt, the part that had been betrayed, was afraid. Afraid that hearing the truth might only make things worse, that it might shatter whatever fragile hope he had left. You think that telling me everything now is going to make it better? Jimin's voice was sharp, laced with bitterness. You think that after everything, after all the time we've spent apart, after all the lies, you can just explain it and I'm supposed to understand? To forgive you? Jungkook flinched, the words stinging more than he expected. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed to die on his tongue. For the first time in a long time, Jungkook felt lost, uncertain, unsure of how to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, his voice breaking with the weight of his guilt. But I've been carrying this guilt with me for so long, Jimin. Every day I've woken up knowing that I've hurt you, that I've lied to you. And I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. I owe you the truth. I owe you more than that. Jimin's heart twisted at the desperation in Jungkook's voice, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Not after everything that had happened. He felt the anger rising again, the familiar sting of betrayal, and it took everything in him not to lash out. Tell me then, Jimin said, his voice trembling with emotion. Tell me what you were hiding. Tell me why you kept your picture, why you kept your secrets, why you thought you could shut me out for so long and still call me your friend. Jungkook's breath hitched and he took a step closer, his eyes meeting Jimin's with an intensity that made Jimin's chest tighten. There was something raw, something vulnerable in his gaze that made Jimin's heart ache. He had never seen Jungkook like this, not truly. Not this broken. I couldn't tell you, Jungkook whispered, his voice full of pain. I couldn't tell you because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew how much she meant to me, you would hate me. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to lose my best friend. Jimin's chest constricted as he absorbed Jungkook's words. He felt a deep, aching sympathy for him, but it wasn't enough to erase the bitterness, the hurt that still lingered in the air between them. You should have trusted me, Jimin said, his voice barely a whisper. You should have known that I would have understood. But you didn't trust me. And now we're here. And I don't know how to fix this. The words hung in the air, their weight too much to bear. Jungkook stood there, silent, his face unreadable. Jimin wanted to scream. He wanted to shout at him, to ask him how it could have gone this far. But instead, he stood there, frozen, the hurt too much to confront all at once. Do you even know what you've done to me, Jungkook? Jimin said, his voice rising in frustration. Do you have any idea how much you've torn me apart? I've spent so much time thinking it was my fault, thinking I was the one who was broken. But no. It was you. You were the one who kept pushing me away, who kept me in the dark. I thought it was me. I thought I was the problem. Jungkook's eyes filled with regret and he reached out, his hand trembling as he moved closer to Jimin. But Jimin stepped back, holding up a hand to stop him. No, Jimin said, his voice hoarse. Don't come any closer. Jungkook froze, his heart shattering at the words. He had hurt Jimin and now Jimin didn't even want him near. He had always been the one Jimin turned to, the one who could make everything feel right. But now he was the one pushing Jimin away, the one who had betrayed him. He had lost him. I never wanted to hurt you, Jungkook said softly, his voice shaking. I never meant for it to be like this. I don't want to lose you, Jimin. I don't know how to fix it, but I'll do anything. I'll do anything to make it right. Jimin looked at him, his expression torn. He could see the desperation, the genuine pain in Jungkook's eyes, and it almost made him want to reach out. Almost. But the pain was still too fresh, the wound too deep. He wasn't sure he could trust Jungkook again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know if you can, Jimin said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. The words were like a knife, but they were the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, had to be said. The silence that followed was suffocating, both of them standing there, broken in their own ways, unsure of what would come next. Jungkook turned away slowly, his heart heavy with the realization of how far they had fallen. But as he moved towards the door, he looked back at Jimin one last time. I'm sorry, Jimin. I'm sorry for everything. And with that he left, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Jimin standing in the studio, unsure of what was left. What could ever come next for them? The days after their last confrontation were like a fever dream. The words, the anger, the hurt, everything had bled together in a way that left Jimin feeling empty, hollow. He had never known pain like this before. The constant ache in his chest, the confusion, the unanswered questions that gnawed at him. He couldn't escape it. No matter how hard he tried to distract himself, to lose himself in music or the company of others, Jungkook's words still echoed in his head. "I'll wait for you, Jimin." The problem was that Jimin didn't know if he wanted Jungkook to wait for him. Part of him was still angry, still felt betrayed. But deep down, somewhere he barely allowed himself to feel, he knew that the bond they had shared was unlike anything he could ever replace. It wasn't about just forgiveness. It was about something deeper, a trust that had been shattered, a connection that had been twisted by secrets. And now it felt like everything was breaking apart in ways he didn't know how to fix. He found himself back at the studio late one evening, trying to drown the confusion in the quiet hum of the sound equipment. The place that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. But the stillness of the room only made the tension more suffocating. It wasn't the music that had always comforted him. It wasn't the rhythm of the notes. It was something else. The pull of the unresolved. Of Jungkook. Jimin's eyes snapped open when the door to the studio creaked open. There he was again. Jungkook. Jimin's first instinct was to push him away, to tell him to leave, to make it stop. But something in his chest, something too painful to acknowledge, made him stand still. Jungkook was standing in the doorway, hesitant, as if he too wasn't sure if he should be there. His eyes met Jimin's, and for the first time, Jimin saw the full weight of his regret in them. It was as if Jungkook had finally realized just how much had been lost. "I'm sorry," Jungkook said softly, his voice breaking the stillness. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can we talk? Please." Jimin stood frozen, his heart pounding, torn between the part of him that wanted to scream at Jungkook and the part of him that still wanted to reach out, still wanted to find a way through the darkness. It was a battle, one that he couldn't win. So instead, he nodded, the slightest movement that gave permission, though he wasn't sure what he wanted from it. Jungkook stepped into the room slowly, carefully, as if treading on fragile ground. He glanced around the studio before his gaze finally locked onto Jimin's, and in that moment it felt as if everything around them had quieted, the noise of the world falling away. All that remained was the rawness between them. "I've been thinking about everything you said," Jungkook continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I know I can't undo what's been done. But I need you to know. I didn't do it to hurt you. I didn't keep things from you because I wanted to be selfish. I did it because I was scared. Scared that if I told you, if I showed you how much my mother meant to me, it would destroy what we had." Jimin clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. The words hit him in ways that he hadn't expected. There was pain in Jungkook's voice, a vulnerability that Jimin hadn't allowed himself to recognize until now. And yet, the hurt still lingered, festering beneath the surface. "You think hiding things from me was the answer?" Jimin's voice trembled, but there was a hard edge to it. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? You think I wouldn't understand why you kept her close to you? That I wouldn't get it?" Jungkook's face twisted in regret, the guilt written all over him. "I thought if I told you, you'd see it as betrayal. You've always been the one who carried the weight of everything, her death, the grief, and I didn't want to add to that. I didn't want you to think I was trying to replace her place in your life, because I could never do that. But I thought if I kept it to myself, maybe I could hold on to her for just a little longer." The words hung in the air like smoke, curling and twisting with every breath they took. Jimin felt something in him crack. He wanted to scream at Jungkook, to lash out and tell him how wrong he was. But there was something else too, a deep sadness that gnawed at him. They had both been so lost, so caught up in their own pain, that they hadn't seen the other's suffering. And now they were standing here, surrounded by everything that had gone wrong, and they didn't know how to fix it. "You think I didn't feel that same way?" Jimin said, his voice barely a whisper. "You think I didn't want to hold on to her too? You think I didn't carry that grief every damn day? But I didn't shut you out. I didn't push you away. I didn't keep things from you." Jungkook's face crumpled, and for a moment, Jimin thought he was going to break down in front of him. "I'm sorry," Jungkook whispered again. "I'm so sorry, Jimin. I never meant to hurt you." Jimin felt a flicker of something. A spark. A tiny thread of understanding, but it was fragile and it scared him. He was afraid that if he allowed himself to feel it, everything would shatter. So instead, he swallowed it down, burying it under the weight of his anger. "Do you even know what you've done?" Jimin's voice cracked, his chest tightening with every word. "I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know who you are anymore. We're not the same people we were, Jungkook. We can't go back." The words hit Jungkook like a punch to the gut. He looked as though he'd been physically struck, his face pale and his hands trembling. "I know," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I know we can't go back. But I don't want to lose you. Not like this. I can't. You've always been my brother, Jimin. My family. And I'm sorry I took that for granted. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Not really. But I'm here. I'm still here, and I'll wait for you. I'll do whatever it takes. Jimin felt his heart twist in his chest, a painful, familiar ache. He had spent so much time fighting against the pain, against the emptiness, that he had never allowed himself to fully feel it. But now it was all crashing down on him, and he didn't know what to do with it. He couldn't pretend it didn't matter, couldn't pretend he didn't care. Because he did. So much more than he was willing to admit. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jimin said, his voice breaking, the tears threatening to spill from his eyes. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. But I don't want to lose you either. Jungkook stepped forward, this time not hesitating. His hands reached out, and this time Jimin didn't pull away. Slowly, carefully, they closed the distance between them. Jungkook's hands gently cupped Jimin's face, and for a moment everything else faded away. All the anger, all the betrayal, all the hurt, it didn't disappear, but it felt like they were standing in the eye of a storm. In that moment, there was nothing but the quiet from their shared pain. I'm sorry, Jungkook whispered again, his forehead resting against Jimin's. I don't know what else to say, but I'll wait. For as long as it takes. And in the stillness that followed, Jimin closed his eyes, feeling the weight of their past pressing down on them. He didn't know where this would lead, didn't know if they could ever find a way back to what they once had. But one thing was certain, whatever happened, they couldn't go on pretending. The truth had been laid bare, and now they would have to decide if they were willing to face it together, or if the distance between them would grow too wide to ever close again. The days following the confrontation in the studio were quiet, but the silence between Jimin and Jungkook felt like an impending storm. Every glance, every word exchanged felt fragile, as though the slightest touch could break something beyond repair. Jimin had hoped that, after the vulnerable words they shared that night, things would start to settle, that the weight between them would ease. But the truth was, it hadn't. It had only grown heavier, as if each unsaid word, each unresolved emotion, was adding another brick to the wall that seemed to be growing between them. Jimin was still processing everything Jungkook had confessed, everything he had revealed about his fear of losing him. He wanted to believe him. He wanted to believe that Jungkook's actions hadn't been motivated by malice but by fear. But even with that understanding, there was still a part of him that couldn't shake the anger. How could Jungkook have been so blind? How could he have thought that keeping his grief hidden, burying the memory of his mother, was the right way to protect him? Jimin had spent years wrestling with his own grief, his own loneliness, but never once had he kept it from Jungkook. Never once had he thought that shielding his emotions would make things easier. He had always believed that their friendship was strong enough to withstand anything, that they could face anything together. But now everything felt like a lie. He sat in the studio late that night, staring blankly at the untouched guitar in front of him. His fingers hovered over the strings, but the music felt distant. Every note felt empty. It was as if the one thing that had always been his escape, his solace, no longer worked. His mind kept circling back to Jungkook's words, to the confession, to the apology, and to the hope in his eyes. Jimin's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. He could feel Jungkook's presence, the weight of his gaze, even from behind. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment when they would have to face what had been left unsaid. Jungkook hesitated at the doorway, his hands in his pockets, his posture stiff. Jimin, he said softly, his voice filled with uncertainty. Can we talk? Jimin didn't answer immediately. He didn't know what to say. There was so much on his mind, so many things he wanted to ask, so much anger and hurt still churning inside him. But despite everything, he knew they had to talk. They couldn't keep avoiding it, not anymore. I don't know if there's anything left to say, Jimin replied, his voice low, strained. You've said everything, Jungkook. You've apologized, you've explained yourself, but it's not that simple. Jungkook stepped closer, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and regret. I know it's not simple. I know I can't just fix it with words. But I need you to know something, Jimin. I've been carrying this guilt for so long, and I can't keep living like this. I've lost myself in all the lies, in all the secrets, and I don't know who I am anymore without you. Without us. Jimin clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The pain was still fresh, still sharp, and hearing Jungkook's words made it feel even worse. Do you really think it's that easy? Do you think that just because you've apologized, just because you're telling me everything now, that it's enough? You think I can just forget all of this? Jungkook flinched at the venom in Jimin's voice, but he didn't back down. No. I don't expect you to forget. I don't expect everything to go back to the way it was. I just need you to know that I'm sorry, Jimin. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't want to lose you. Jimin stood up abruptly, turning to face Jungkook, his chest tight with anger. Well, you did lose me, he said harshly. You didn't just hurt me, Jungkook. You tore us apart. You kept me in the dark for so long, and now you want to act like you can just apologize and make it better? It doesn't work that way. Jungkook's eyes flashed with a mixture of confusion and frustration. What do you want me to say, Jimin? What do you want me to do? I've told you everything. I've confessed. I've apologized. What else is there? Jimin took a step toward him, his voice rising. You don't get it, do you? It's not just about the lies. It's about everything. All the years we spent pretending like we were fine, like we didn't have demons lurking in the background. It's about the way we've both been hiding from each other. You think this is just about your mother's picture? You think this is just about a stupid pendant? It's about everything we've been running from. Everything we've kept locked away. Jungkook's face tightened with emotion, his hands shaking as he ran them through his hair. I didn't know how to share the pain with you. I didn't know how to make you see that I was hurting too. I thought if I kept it to myself, if I kept her memory close to me, I could hold on to it. I could hold on to her. And I thought that maybe it would make everything else easier. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to make you understand that I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of losing everything. Jimin's heart wrenched at the desperation in Jungkook's voice. For a split second, he saw the boy he had always known, the boy who had stood by him through everything. The boy who had been his brother, his friend. But that boy felt so distant now, so far away. And it made Jimin realize something that he had been trying to ignore. He didn't know if he could go back to that. He didn't know if they could ever be the same. You should have trusted me, Jimin said, his voice barely above a whisper. You should have told me, Jungkook. I would have understood. I would have been there. Jungkook's expression faltered, and for a moment Jimin thought he might break. His eyes, usually so full of certainty, were now filled with an unbearable sadness. I was afraid, Jimin. I was so afraid of losing you. You've always been the one who could handle everything. You've always been the strong one. I thought if I showed you how weak I was, how much I was struggling, it would push you away. I thought it would break us. Jimin stepped back, shaking his head. And now look where we are, Jungkook. Look at what we've become. You kept everything from me and now you're telling me that it was out of fear? How do you think I feel right now? How do you think I feel, knowing that the person I trusted the most, my brother, was hiding all of this from me? Jungkook took a step forward, his face full of regret. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to tell you without hurting you. I don't know if we can fix this, Jimin whispered, his voice shaking with the weight of his emotions. I don't know if there's anything left to fix. There was a long pause between them, the silence heavy with the weight of everything that had been said. Jimin's heart was torn, his anger warring with the overwhelming ache in his chest. Jungkook's apology, his vulnerability, had struck a chord in him. But the damage was done. The years of silence, of distance, of unspoken pain had left a scar on their friendship. And Jimin wasn't sure if he could heal it. I don't know either, Jungkook admitted softly, his voice filled with a quiet resignation. I don't know if we can fix it. But I'll be here, Jimin. I'm not going anywhere. I just need you to know that. I'll wait even if it takes a lifetime. I'll wait for you to be ready. Jimin swallowed hard, trying to suppress the emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. He wanted to believe Jungkook. He wanted to believe that they could fix this. But there was a part of him that was scared that the trust they had built over the years had been broken beyond repair. The room was silent again, the weight of their words hanging in the air like a storm that hadn't yet passed. Jimin didn't know what to say. He didn't know what would happen next. All he knew was that nothing was the same anymore. And he wasn't sure if it ever would be. The days after their last confrontation were not a simple quiet that settled after a storm. They were a constant, oppressive pressure, a suffocating silence between Jimin and Jungkook that neither of them knew how to break. The studio, once a place where creativity flowed freely between them, had turned into a battlefield of unspoken words and raw emotions. Jimin found himself there more often than not, staring at the instruments, the half-finished songs on the table, anything, really, that could keep his mind from returning to the moment when everything had shifted. When they had faced the truth about each other. Jimin knew Jungkook was trying. He was doing everything he could to show his regret, his vulnerability. But every word, every attempt to explain, only seemed to deepen the chasm between them. Jimin wasn't sure anymore if the trust they had once shared could be rebuilt. The more he tried to understand Jungkook's pain, the more it reminded him of his own. The betrayal felt too deep, the weight of the years spent in the dark, each of them silently suffering while the other pretended to be fine. Could they really move past it? It was late one night when Jimin found himself pacing the studio floor again, the sound of his footsteps the only thing breaking the silence. He was running on fumes, his body and mind exhausted from days of overthinking, of avoiding the one conversation he knew had to happen. It was as if his own feelings were locked in a cage he didn't know how to escape from. The door creaked open and Jimin didn't need to turn around to know who it was. He could feel Jungkook's presence, the weight of his every step as he entered the room, his movements tentative almost as if he were afraid to disturb the fragile atmosphere. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Jungkook said quietly, his voice hesitant. "I know you're probably tired of hearing me talk, but Jimin cut him off, turning sharply to face him. His voice was cold, sharper than he intended. "What do you want, Jungkook?" The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Jungkook looked as though he was about to say something, but the words faltered on his tongue. It was clear he wasn't sure how to approach Jimin anymore, not after everything that had been said, everything that had been left unsaid. "I want to make things right," Jungkook said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I can't undo what's been done. I know I can't just fix everything by apologizing. But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted us to end up like this." Jimin stood still, his chest tight with emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel until now. His eyes were locked on Jungkook's, searching, trying to read the truth in his gaze. But every time he thought he saw something real, something that resembled the boy he had once trusted, it slipped away. He didn't know how to let go of the anger, how to move past the betrayal. The pain was still too raw. "I don't know what you expect from me," Jimin finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can just forgive you. I don't know if I can look at you and forget what you've done to me." Jungkook's face fell, and for a moment he looked like he might collapse under the weight of Jimin's words. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't think I deserve your forgiveness. But I can't keep pretending like everything is fine. I can't keep pretending that I didn't mess up, that I didn't hurt you. You think I don't know that?" Jimin snapped, his eyes flashing with frustration. "I've been trying to figure this out for days. I've been trying to understand, trying to piece everything together, but every time I think I've got a grip on it, something else comes up. You're telling me that you've been afraid, that you were keeping things from me because you didn't want to lose me, but look where we are now, Jungkook. We're already lost." Jungkook took a step forward, his voice shaking. I know we're lost. And I can't take that back. But I can tell you the truth. The whole truth." Jimin's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, the whole truth? What else is there?" Jungkook hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I haven't told you everything. There's more you don't know." Jimin felt his heart skip a beat. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The words hit him harder than he expected. More? What else could there possibly be? Hadn't they already torn everything apart? Hadn't they already faced the darkest parts of their past? "What do you mean, more?" Jimin demanded, his voice low and tight. "You've already broken me with what you've said. What else could you possibly say to make it worse?" Jungkook looked up, his face a mix of guilt and sorrow. "It's not something I wanted to hide. I thought it would be easier to carry this on my own, to deal with it myself. But I can't do it anymore, Jimin. I need you to understand." Jimin stepped back, his mind racing, but his heart already starting to brace itself for whatever was coming next. "I'm listening." Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, his face tight with the strain of what he was about to say. "When my mother died, I wasn't just grieving her. I was grieving the life I thought I could have had. The family we could have been. And the truth is, Jimin, I wasn't just hiding my grief from you. I was hiding it from myself. I didn't know how to move on. I didn't know how to let go of the past and be the person I was supposed to be. So I kept things from you. But there's more." Jimin's heart pounded in his chest, and the walls he had built inside himself started to crack. There was something in Jungkook's eyes, something so raw and desperate that it made Jimin falter. He had never seen this side of him. This wasn't just about a pendant, about a picture. This was something deeper. This was a confession not just about what he had done, but about who he had been. The fear, the anger, the weakness. "I'm not just apologizing for keeping the picture, Jimin," Jungkook continued, his voice tight. "I'm apologizing for everything. For pretending like I had it all figured out when I didn't. For pretending I could carry all of this alone when you were right there, beside me the whole time. I pushed you away because I didn't know how to let you in. I didn't know how to let anyone in." Jimin was silent for a long moment, his emotions swirling in a storm he couldn't control. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell Jungkook how much he had hurt him. But he didn't. Instead, he stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had been said, of everything they had both been carrying. He didn't know if this was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when everything would come crashing down and everything would finally be laid bare. Or if it was the moment that would shatter him once and for all. "So," Jimin said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "you've been hiding everything all along, not just from me, but from yourself?" Jungkook nodded, his expression filled with a sorrow that Jimin could feel deep in his bones. "I know it doesn't make sense. I know I've messed up. But I want to fix it. I want to try. But I don't know if I can do that alone. I don't know if I can do it without you." Jimin looked at him, his heart torn between the part of him that wanted to hold onto the hope that they could fix this and the part of him that felt like it was all slipping away. He didn't know if they could go back. He didn't know if forgiveness was even possible. But one thing was clear, whatever happened next, it wouldn't be easy. The truth was far more painful than either of them had expected. And for the first time, Jimin realized that the road ahead wasn't just about forgiving Jungkook, it was about forgiving himself. The quiet between Jimin and Jungkook was unbearable, each of them struggling to find the right words, but neither of them truly knowing how to bridge the chasm that had formed between them. Jimin's mind buzzed with confusion and hurt, while Jungkook stood before him, eyes searching for any hint that Jimin might be willing to forgive, to at least understand. It had been a few days since their last conversation. Days spent avoiding each other, keeping a distance that seemed necessary but felt like an insurmountable gap. Jimin couldn't stop thinking about what Jungkook had said, how he had finally confessed the truth, and how it felt like a revelation, like a moment of clarity. But that clarity didn't erase the years of pain. It didn't erase the way Jungkook had shut him out for so long. Jimin sat on the edge of the couch in the studio, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of his own thoughts pressing down on him. His fingers itched to pick up a guitar, to play, to pour his emotions into the strings like he had always done. But even that felt like a betrayal now, like every note would be soaked with the bitterness he couldn't shake off. He was trapped. And he knew it. It wasn't until the sound of footsteps broke the silence that Jimin looked up. Jungkook. Again. I thought you needed some time, Jungkook said softly, his eyes filled with something that resembled hesitation. He wasn't sure whether he should be here, whether this was even the right moment, but he couldn't stay away any longer. But I can't keep waiting in silence. I don't know what you need from me anymore. I don't know how to fix this, Jimin. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly as he stood up slowly. He didn't want to feel this conflicted, didn't want to keep opening the door to feelings he was trying to lock away. But it was too late. Jungkook had cracked that door open, and now Jimin didn't know if he could shut it again. You really think you can just fix everything with more words? Jimin asked, his voice barely controlled. You think telling me everything is going to make it okay? Jungkook took a step forward, a clear effort to bridge the distance between them, but the hesitation in his movements made Jimin's chest tighten. I don't know what else to do, Jimin. I don't know how to make you see that I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not the person I thought I was either. I've been hiding from everything, from you, from myself, and now I don't even know how to find my way back. Jimin turned his back to him, not wanting to see the vulnerability in Jungkook's face. He didn't know how to handle it, didn't know how to face it without letting everything fall apart. He had tried so hard to keep himself together. But the more Jungkook spoke, the more the walls Jimin had built around himself started to crumble. You were never that person, Jungkook, Jimin said, his voice low and bitter. You've been hiding from me, hiding from yourself, and now you want me to believe that everything you've done has been because you were afraid? You don't get it. You don't get what you've done to us. To me. Jungkook's heart clenched at the sharpness in Jimin's voice, the pain in his words cutting deeper than anything he had expected. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I'm not asking for everything to go back to the way it was. But I need you to see that I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix everything. I know it doesn't erase what I've done. But I can't change what's happened. All I can do is tell you that I'm trying. I'm trying, Jimin. For you. For us. Jimin clenched his fists at his sides, his frustration building. Trying? Trying doesn't even begin to cover it, Jungkook. You've spent so long running away from this. Running away from me. From us. I've tried to be there for you, I've tried to carry my own pain and yours, and all along you've been hiding from me. You think that's something I can just forgive? Jungkook's face tightened, his hands shaking as he stepped closer. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his voice desperate. I never wanted to break us. I thought if I kept everything hidden, if I kept her memory close to me, if I kept you at arm's length, maybe I could survive the grief. Maybe I could protect you from it. From the pain of losing everything. Losing her. But I see now that all I've done is hurt you. Jimin took a step back, his breath coming faster now, his mind reeling. You think you've been protecting me? Do you hear yourself? You kept everything hidden, you made all the decisions, you pushed me away, and now you're telling me you did it because you were trying to protect me? That's bullshit, Jungkook. Jungkook recoiled slightly, but his voice was quieter now, filled with a raw honesty that Jimin couldn't ignore. I don't know what else to say, Jimin. I was scared. I was scared of losing you. Of losing everything I ever cared about. And I thought if I kept it to myself, I could keep it all together. But I see now that all I've done is ruin everything. The room was thick with silence as Jimin stood there, the weight of Jungkook's words hanging in the air. He didn't know how to process it all. His mind was torn between the anger he felt and the raw ache in his chest, the part of him that still wanted to believe, still wanted to forgive. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words caught in his throat. He had wanted to scream at Jungkook to tell him how much he had hurt him, how betrayed he felt. But now, in the face of Jungkook's vulnerability, Jimin couldn't find the strength to do it. Jungkook stepped even closer, his eyes searching Jimin's face, trying to read his emotions. "Please, Jimin," he said softly, almost pleading. "I can't fix everything. I know that. But I need you to know. I'm here. I'll always be here. And I'll wait for you no matter how long it takes." Jimin looked at him, the weight of his words pressing on him like a suffocating force. There was so much more he wanted to say, so much more he wanted to scream. But the truth was, he didn't know what to do anymore. He didn't know how to move forward, how to find a way out of this mess they had created together. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Jimin said, his voice breaking as the tears finally threatened to fall. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Jungkook's face crumpled at the words, and for a moment he looked like he might collapse under the weight of Jimin's pain. But then something shifted in his eyes, a deep, raw understanding. He reached out, not to touch Jimin, but to show him that he was there, that he wasn't backing away. "I know," Jungkook whispered, his voice filled with regret. "I know. And I'm not asking for you to forgive me right away. But I'll wait. I'll wait for as long as it takes." Jimin closed his eyes, feeling the sting of his own vulnerability, the overwhelming ache of a heart that had been broken too many times. He didn't know if he could ever forgive Jungkook. He didn't know if he could ever trust him again. But in that moment, he realized something that terrified him more than anything else. He wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Not completely. "I don't know how long it will take," Jimin said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "But I need time. I need to figure this out." Jungkook nodded slowly, the expression on his face one of both relief and resignation. "I'll wait, Jimin. I'll wait as long as you need." The room fell silent again, but this time, the silence didn't feel quite as suffocating. There was still so much between them, so much to unpack, so much that needed to be said. But in that moment, they both understood something, that this wasn't the end. It wasn't over. There was still a chance, however small, for them to rebuild what had been broken. And as they stood there, both on the edge of everything, they knew that the journey ahead would be anything but easy. But for the first time in a long time, they both had the glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to start again. Maybe.